Hi, welcome to the web show at Todd. I'll be reading from my book, Don't Act, 101 Reasons Why You Shouldn't, continuing these very helpful acting lessons that I'm giving you, the internet. Thought I'd spice things up. I'm in the bedroom this time. It's a naked lady on the wall. Ah, naked lady. All right, here we go. Let's see, where did we leave off? We talked about stand-up comedy last time. So, don't act. Reason number 7, you will have to spend time with acting teachers. I had but one working actor as a teacher at the acting conservatory affiliated with NYU that I attended, and of all my teachers, she was the only one who was the most pleasant to be around. The majority was a drag, to be quite frank. She obviously taught to supplement her income as a professional actor, but she did seem to genuinely enjoy teaching. The only problem with her was that she was constantly absent from school because she was always getting acting gigs. Still, it was nice to be able to point to her on television, say to my parents, "That's one of my teachers." I couldn't do that with anyone else. I had another teacher with whom the nice one was actually best friends, maybe lovers, who I believe was about 400 years old. She reminded me of Yoda from the Star Wars pictures that were a lot of fun before George Lucas went crazy and ruined them. Except her clever little lessons about living weren't so much clever as cruel and usually utilized the words stupid and worthless. She sat like a lump in the front row of theater chairs in the small studio space where she taught and barked that everyone should quit acting because they were all lousy. She once told me I wasn't so bad, but I was too ugly to be in show business. Actually, you know what? That's complete nonsense. I'm gorgeous. I never actually saw her get up or down from that chair or leave the room. She may have lived there. I had this other teacher my freshman year who was so horribly depressed that he discouraged laughter in his classroom. He encouraged crying. He reveled in tears. In fact, the only time I ever saw him smile was when one of his students was crying. On the last day of our first semester, this teacher sat us all down and asked us, how do you feel? He wanted to know how we felt about the semester, acting and ourselves as aspiring actors. How do you feel? He would ask over and over again with a crooked mouth and whining speech pattern. Then he would say, don't be afraid to express your emotions, express yourself, whatever it is, be honest. Somehow this led to one of the prettiest girls in the class, very trim too, breaking down and crying because she felt like she was fat. Then the other young women in the class started crying. Then the other young women in the class started crying along with her because they felt fat as well. And soon all the females in the room were crying about how fat they were. You know, quick interjection here. It's always frustrating when you self-published a novel and you went over it a million times and you still find typos. This is why you need a team of people helping you with their book and proofreading. People of the world, help me. Give me money and help me. Anyway, the other young women in the class started crying along with her because they felt fat as well. And soon all the females in the room were crying about how fat they were. Well, except for one. My only classmate, who was actually unhealthily overweight, sat quietly, completely uninterested. And the teacher was ecstatic, smiling and yelling for more of these wonderful tears. Now, this struck me as absurdly funny, and since the teacher had instructed that we all express ourselves openly, I began to laugh hysterically. I was thrown out of class. And much to my chagrin, for the next 2 years after that, I wound up with the teacher who was responsible for mentoring my freshman year teacher. He was even more depressed than his protege, if you can imagine, perhaps manically so, and wore a constant frown while always slumping his shoulders. He looked upon all other human beings with what appeared a generous amount of disdain. For 2 years, he made it clear that the only thing he wanted to see was me crying in front of the class. When I finally did, he smiled. This was the only time I ever saw him smile, and it was then I realized that his classes, along with many other of my teachers, amounted to nothing more than therapy sessions run by a grossly unqualified and manipulative therapist. I myself have taught classes in improvisation. I use many of the techniques I learned in college, including elements culled from my voice and movement classes, to instruct my students in how to be the most efficient and entertaining improvisational performers possible. Ultimately, from the vantage point of a teacher, I realized that most cases were hopeless, as talent simply can't be taught. If the talent isn't there, then the class is a waste of time. In retrospect, I began thinking that perhaps my acting teachers weren't so much depressed because they didn't make it as actors, but rather they were depressed because of all the horrible acting they had to watch each and every day. Maybe that's why they wanted to make me cry. I was inadvertently torturing them with my amateurish performances. Oh, you read it and pronounce it right yourself. God. Now, I ask you, what are acting teachers really qualified to teach, especially given that they rarely work as actors? And while I'm thinking about it, even if they did work as actors, what is it that they really have to impart? Sure, understanding how to analyze a scene and breathe from your diaphragm is important for an actor, but that amounts to about 10% of what one needs to know about performing for a living. There is this, I'm sorry I keep messing up. This is a cold reading. I haven't looked at this book in years. There's this whole business aspect to show business about, there's this whole business aspect to show business, I got it right that time, about which I never heard a single actor teacher impart any wisdom. You know why that is? Because if they were to impart any of that wisdom, it would boil down to two simple words that would immediately put them out of a paycheck. Don't act. So that's a little rant about acting teachers. Obviously, they're not all that bad, and I'm being comical. And in LA, there's actually a lot of character actors who occasionally teach classes, and you can learn a lot from them, although it's very expensive. There are good acting teachers out there, obviously. But the ultimate point there is that there aren't any classes or teachers who really tell you about how to make it in the business, because there's no way of telling you how to make it in the business, because it's all luck. It's dependent on good luck. Yeah, I mean, that's all I got for you today, and I'm sorry I messed up some of the words. And I can't believe I found a typo. I'm very upset. It costs me money every time I find a typo and I have to fix it because I'm anal retentive. But you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. If you... I know this isn't Kickstarter, but send me money and then I'll fix it.